Hello and welcome to this short video presentation about VantagePoint energy and carbon scenario planning software. My name's Chris Dunham. I'm the Managing Director of Carbon Descent. We're a company that's been going for about 14 years now, based in the UK, and we're a company that produces software and provides consultancy in the area of energy and carbon reduction, as hopefully the name of the company, Carbon Descent, suggests. What I'm going to very quickly do is show you the version of VantagePoint that we have created for EPE, the National Energy Planning Agency in Brazil, under a project that has been funded by the UK Foreign and Commonwealth Office. So it's been set, just a bit of background, it's been used extensively in the UK in a different form, and what we have done is translated the software for EPE under a brief that they provided to make it do certain things that they wanted it to do, which I'll talk you through now. So I'm just going to briefly show you the software and how it works. Here you can see scenarios, different scenarios that have been created for different areas and so on. So the first thing to do is click Create New Scenario, and you can see here that we've loaded in different regions of Brazil. So we could choose, you could either choose Brazil nationally, or you could choose a smaller area. So we'll choose Rio just as an example. Here you can see different scenarios for growth that were created by EPE. So we can choose one of these, or you could choose a custom one and create your own. But these will give us baseline data, and together with that, business as usual forecast of how energy use might grow in the periods that we're looking at. So you can choose different sectors. This current version has been set up for the public and residential sectors only, but the versions that we created in the UK covered all the building sectors and transport as well. So it would be possible to set this up in the same way as it has been in the UK. So I'm going to choose both sectors. We can give it a name, and let's say this is a video version. Here you can choose a reference data group, and basically that's a rather grand name for the assumptions behind the modeling. And you could, if you had set up your own assumptions, you'd be able to choose them from this list, and I'll briefly show you how that can be done. So moving through to the next stage, it's asking us for to confirm this baseline data, and this has been pulled up when we chose the option where we chose the baseline and business as usual data earlier. So this is one of EPE's scenarios. So this is we've broken down the total energy use and assigned it to Rio in this case. And here you can see these are the target years. So 2010, you could change these and you could add more years if you wanted to. So you could do something much more detailed, look at every year into the future for 100 years if you wished. Here you can set out BAU, business as usual. This is the growth rate. So we're saying that by 2020, and without any intervention or policies, that energy use would grow by 51.3% effectively. So it would be 1.513 times what it was in 2010, our base year, and so on for 2030. So here we can set some targets. So we might say, well, we actually want to achieve 30% reduction by 2030, 20%. I'm rather randomly choosing figures, but here you can see what that means in terms of megawatt hours saved. So moving through to the next stage, here's where we would choose what measures you want to analyze in the modeling. So you can see we've got different sectors here. So the model is set up with sectors and subsectors. So residential, rural, residential houses, residential apartments. This was something that was agreed with EPE in terms of how they wanted it broken down. And here you can see the measures themselves. So at this stage you could say, well, actually I don't want to look at any measures affecting apartments. I'm going to take them all out. So you can double click on them and remove them and so on, as I'm doing now. And if you press refresh, you can put them all back in, change your mind, and so on. So you can see a whole range of different measures here, from different energy efficient measures to solar, solar thermal, and also growth measures. So one way of modeling business as usual growth is to include that as a measure in the scenario. We chose earlier, if you'd chosen the custom method earlier on, rather than taking one of EPE's growth business as usual scenarios, you might use this process. So you can, within the scenario, you can have growth which might relate to new homes, which would increase electricity use and so on. So there's quite a lot to take in here, but basically here we have all the different measures that you might wish to analyze, and you're going to see those later on. So if I press OK, it'll start creating a scenario, and as you can see, it's now created that successfully. So we can now, here we have our newly created scenario appearing in the list. So if we now double click on that, it will bring up the scenario which is under development. It's currently incomplete, as you can see here. So here, if you flick through these, you can see various assumptions that are being made, underlying data that's being used in the modeling. So this is a breakdown of energy use in different sectors, so public electricity consumption, residential biomass consumption, and based on those growth factors that EPE used, we're using those same factors to factor up consumption there. So going through other assumptions, these are the costs for each measure. So all of this could be changed, so you could simply overwrite any of this and type something else in if you wished, or you can do that as I showed you earlier. You could create your own set of assumptions like this and save them. I'll show you how to do that. So different assumptions about costs, capital costs, reinvestment periods, electricity prices, fuel prices, and emissions factors if you want to look at CO2 emissions and so on. So a range of things that you can change, but these are all the ones that are ticked are complete. The one that isn't ticked is the scenario itself. So this is where you would actually begin to put in figures for these different measures that we looked at earlier. So here you can see we could sort these by sector. So for instance, energy efficient refrigerators, solar PV, air source heat pumps, energy efficient lighting, energy efficient wood stoves, etc. So the process would be that you would begin to populate this data. Obviously you need to look at what the units are. The units can be set up with different units, but here this one is defined as number of homes. So we might say we're going to have 20,000 here, we're going to have 30,000 here, and so on. So there'll be a process would be to go through each of these measures and build a scenario of what you think might be feasible or most likely, and then press calculate. Well, it's going to take us a while to do that, so rather than go through and make you watch me enter lots of numbers, I'm going to switch to one that we created earlier. So here you can see this one is for this is a national scenario for Brazil as a whole, and so we can look at that. So here you can see this one's already been populated with numbers. So if we now look at the results, we can see that here's our energy reduction target, here's our saving in this scenario. So we're going way above the targets, which is good good news. And there you can look at the results in more detail. So these are the different outputs that come with VantagePoint. The one that EP were most interested in terms of getting outputs was something called a MAC curve. So here you can see the different measures, and this curve effectively represents how cost effective the different measures are. And if you find that confusing, you can look at the numbers behind each of these graphs. We can look at plenty of different graphs here, so we can look at how much biomass is being used, power saved or generated. We can look at resource used by measures, and for any of these we can actually click on this button and export the figures behind this into Excel, so you can manipulate them there. You can look at capital expenditure that would be required by the different measures, and net present value, and so on. And for each of these you can actually filter the results, so we can look at the public sector on its own, or the residential sector on its own, and then we can also look at subsectors, so we can look at residential homes, residential apartments, or rural homes. So those are the outputs that you get. So the idea is that you might have targets in mind that you wish to meet, and you might create a number of different scenarios that might meet those targets, and then analyze which one is the most cost-effective scenario to meet the target. So other things that you can do in the software that I mentioned earlier, one thing that you can do is you can set up the database, the backend database, on a shared server or a location, so multiple people could be using this database if you have many people working on the scenario. You can create new measures. So there's a process here for creating measures. So we're obviously, it comes with a list of measures, default measures that have been set up for the national Brazilian scenario that EPE are going to be creating, but you can actually go through and set up the units, the name of the measure, what sector it applies to, etc. A number of things that you need to set up. There's a wizard there to take you through creating a new measure. I won't go through all the detail of that, but hopefully you get the point. So here you can also change the assumptions. So for instance, CO2 emission factors for different fuels, if you wanted to change these, you could create a different set, or perhaps the costs for different measures. Again, you could change those, and then they can be saved in as a reference data group. So here you can see this is the default one, but you could add your own, which might be let's say Rio's assumptions, and then you could change these emissions factors or these assumptions and add them to your group. And when you go back and create a new scenario, we can see now we have Rio's assumptions. Obviously we didn't change any of them, but hopefully you get the point that you can create your own to use when you're creating a new scenario. So that very briefly is VantagePoint. Thank you very much for listening.